Today we're doing the first lesson of Unit 7. We're starting off with fractions. So before we begin with the page, you can go ahead and get page 367 out and ready, but I'm going to just give a little brief introduction to what fractions are. So fractions, it's spelled like this, F-R-A-C-T-I-O-N-S, and part of that word, fract, reminds me of the word fracture, which is another word for a break, right? So if someone said, oh, I fractured my arm, that means they broke their arm. And that makes sense because fractions are equal-sized pieces of a whole thing. So it's just taking some sort of whole thing and chopping it up into equal-sized pieces. Now in math, when we talk about fractions, it's really important that I emphasize that these pieces are equally sized with one another. So you probably already use fractions all the time. If you just imagine, you get a foot-long sandwich from Subway or something like that, and it's too big to eat by yourself, so you might cut it in half, right? Half is a fraction, and what it looks like when it has it written either with that slash sideways or like this means that you're breaking it into two pieces. That's the number to make a whole. There's this piece, and there's this piece. There's two pieces total. And then you're going to eat one of them, and then maybe save the other piece for your sibling or eat it tomorrow or something like that. So you're probably used to doing that all the time, and it's really important as we work with fractions, you get comfortable sort of using your eyes and visualizing what would be fair, because I think we've all been in a situation before where you say, oh, I want half of that donut, and someone says, okay, here you go, and they cut it like that. And then would it be fair for one person to have this much and the other person to have this much? No. So that's not a fair fraction. So just as we're slicing these different shapes into different sizes, just make sure you're trying to be fair and have both or as many, like it could be up to like really any amount, but all the pieces need to be the same size. So rather than cutting it that way, it should be cut probably down the middle, or if it's into more pieces than that, down the middle again, so that all of the portions are equal. We use fractions in life, just like cutting up your food and stuff, but we also use it in science, so it's important, like if you're measuring things. We've learned about like liters and feet before. In between, on the ruler where it has 0 inches and then it has 1 inch, all those little lines in there are indicating fractions or pieces of an inch. So hopefully some of this has triggered a little bit of memories for you of using fractions before, and it won't be too hard when we get started. Okay, so one more thing. When we write our fractions, let me show you something that I learned recently, like as an adult. You know how you see the number on the top? There's the numerator. That's what it's called, the number on the top, and the denominator. It's written like 3/4 or something like that. Another way to say that is 3 divided by 4. And this symbol we've seen for division before, right, with the 2 dots. I just realized, recently, it's like little placeholders. And there's that line in the middle again, just like right there. So, if that's kind of a lot for right now, but I just thought that was like a fun little fact of like the fraction symbol and the division symbol and how they're connected like that. I think it's pretty interesting. Okay, let's go ahead and jump into it. We're on page 367. And that starts off with this parent letter with a little bit of overview. So just like what I was saying before, we're working with fractions. We're talking about breaking a whole, an entire thing, into equal-sized shapes. And then a unit fraction, all that means is just having a 1 on top. So one of the 3 pieces, and this is broken into 3 pieces, so that's called thirds, right? And so a unit fraction of this would just be 1/3. And then when you add them different unit pieces together, you can have almost a whole amount, or if you have the same number on top and on bottom, that is the whole amount. And like I said before, the number on the top is called the numerator, the number on the bottom is the denominator. And then later throughout the unit, we're going to talk about fraction values that are equivalent, which is a fancy way of saying the same size as one another. So, like I'm sure you've done before, if you have a sandwich, you might cut it in half, and then you might cut each of those halves in half. And that all that means is now that you've cut it into 4 pieces, right? There's 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces. These 2 pieces, these 2/4, are the same size of this shape as 1/2 of the shape. But like I said, I'm giving you a sneak peek for later in the unit, so don't stress about that right now, but just keep that in mind. And you know, we can decide which is bigger or smaller between things that are not equivalent, you know, which one is greater, which one is less than. So, to start us off, you can go ahead and hold off on cutting out this top rectangle, just wait on that for a minute. Cut out the shapes on the bottom of this page, of page 369A. And then we're going to use those to sort of move them around on specifically sized rectangles on the next page. Just keep in mind, though, that like when we learned about rulers and stuff, that specific length of 1 inch, that's, you know, something that we learned. There's not anything special about this particular rectangle. We're just using it so you have a straight line and everything. So don't stress about memorizing the size of those or anything like that. Okay, so you've cut out those little rectangles from the bottom of that earlier page. And now we're going to put them on top of this rectangle here and see what, you know, how this can be broken up. So I don't really have the paper here, so I'm going to just draw it. But you could have set it up like that. And so you have 4 equal parts. If you didn't do it that way, don't stress out. You might have actually put them out like this. I'm pretty sure it'll fit this way as well. Still 4 equal parts. So the unit fraction of this would just be 1 out of 4, or 1/4. That's the unit fraction. Yeah. So this one is 1/4. This one is 1/4. This one is 1/4. Oops. And this one is 1/4. You might, kind of looks like, you know, in music, right? We have quarter notes, right? And quarters of a dollar. And all 4 of these all together make a whole, whatever this rectangle is, 4/4, right? You can add them all up. And now you have 4 over 4. 4 pieces of a thing that was cut into 4 pieces, right? All right, let's move on. Okay, so using those rectangles from earlier, you could put them in, I think, this way. And then you would have how many pieces to make this whole shape that are the same size? There are 3 pieces. So this one 1 unit fraction of that shape would be 1/3. This one is also 1 of the 3 parts, 1/3. Same thing right here. This is also 1 of the 3 equal sized pieces. All right, and then using those same rectangles from earlier down on this one, the only way they're going to fit right here is right here. Now this shape could be cut into, something else, but we're just using those rectangles from earlier to make it easy for us. So there's 2 equal parts, right? This one and that one. And so this unit fraction right here, what do you think it is? It's 1/2, 1/2. All right. Now you can go ahead and cut out those triangles from page 369A, and you can go ahead and move them around and make these shapes here. So let's go ahead and take a look at number 4. In this rectangle, it has been cut into 1, 2, 3, 4 pieces, right? So there are 4 equal sized pieces in this whole shape. This particular piece of it is 1 of the 4 pieces. So 1/4, 1/4. Let's look at the number 5. This shape has been cut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So there's 6 equal sized pieces in this shape because of how it's been cut. This triangle is 1 of the 6. So 1/6 of that shape. And this one right here, there are how many pieces? It's been cut into 3 pieces. So this little triangle is 1 of the 3 pieces, or 1/3 of that shape. All right. I just did that one. Okay, so number 7, count those pieces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This triangle is 1 of the 5 pieces. This rectangle has been cut into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces. These 2 pieces are 2 of the 8, and it says 1 of the shaded would be 1 of the 8. But you'll notice, I'm sure, if we had only cut along these purple lines, and we did not cut here, right on these orange lines right here, this shape would have been cut into 4 pieces, right? 1, 2, 3, and 4. And this piece that we just called 2/8 would be the exact same amount of that rectangle as 1/4. And that's an example of an equivalent fraction. 2/8 is the same as 1/4, right? Okay. Okay, so just like we were talking about all these funny little shapes over here, sometimes with fractions we use these bars, and that helps us organize our thoughts on a page or represent something that maybe is harder to draw. So you can represent a fraction with a fraction bar. The denominator tells how many equal parts the whole is, right? That's the number on the bottom, so how many pieces in the whole thing. And then the numerator is how many you're talking about. So if you're talking about the shaded part, that's 1 of the 3, so 1/3. So we're going to go ahead and talk about unit fractions a little bit more. here we have these already divided, and we're going to shade in pieces of it, and we're going to see what we notice. So if it says shade 1 whole, another way to write that is 1 over 1, by the way. So there's one piece in the whole thing, and then there is one piece that you're talking about, right? So 1 over 1. Here we've shaded it into 2 pieces, or cut it into 2 pieces and shaded 1, so that's a half. Here we're going to shade one of these thirds. And then one of these fourths. And then one of these fifths. And then one of these sixths. And then one, that's a seventh. And then we go to the eighth. So all of these original whole things were the same size, and what I'm hoping you'll notice here, take a moment and think about it, as you cut a one size thing into more pieces, what happens to each piece? Well, the more pieces you cut, the smaller each one will be. So that makes sense, right? If you're sharing a pizza with just one friend, you get a lot more pizza than if you're sharing a pizza with 7 friends. You would only get 1/8 of the pizza, if you're including yourself too. Okay. So we're continuing using those fraction bars. We're using our unit fractions to build like other fractions, that don't have 1 on top. So here it says to divide this into 5 equal pieces. Here we go, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then to shade 2 parts of it. So this part is 1/5, and this part is also 1/5. And together we call that 2/5. Let's try number 10. So it's already divided into 3 equal parts. 1, 2, 3. It says to shade 2 parts of it. This one and that one, and just pretend I colored those perfectly. So here we have 1/3, 1 over a third, 1 over 3, right? All those together make 3 over 3, which is 1. And then this thing over here, we had 1/3 plus 1/3, and that equals 2/3. Let's take a look at number 11. So we've divided each of these into the 7th, 1/7, 1/7, 1/7, 1/7, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1/7, and one more 7th, and then we're going to shade 5 parts of that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that would be 1/7 plus 1/7 plus 1/7 plus 1/7 and 1/7, and that is 5/7. Now you're noticing I'm adding these fractions, and I haven't really talked very much about it. It's no big deal when you're adding fractions if they all have the same number on the bottom. It gets a little bit trickier. It's not impossible, nothing you won't be able to handle soon, but if the numbers on the bottom are different, you can't just add them up. So you can't say like 2/3 plus 5/7 and then say, oh, it's 7/10. That doesn't work like that. You have to make it, you have to find a common denominator, and we'll talk about that later. But just keep that in mind. You can only add them so easily like this when the numbers on the bottom are the same. Alright, we just did the 7th, so let's go ahead and we're going to divide this shape into 8ths. So I like to first cut it in half. and then cut each half in half, and now I'm in fourths. And then I'll cut each of those in half. And that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And yes, they're not perfect, but that's okay. Well, we can live with it. So each of those is 1/8. And there are 8 of them. And now if we shade in 7, so I'll chop, 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 chop. And then I'm going to shade in 7. Oops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That's 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 plus 1/8 plus 1/8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah, equals 7/8. And you'll notice when this top number gets pretty close to that bottom number, that means that that shape is almost all the way filled up, right? It's almost the whole thing. Okay, let's go ahead, divide this into 6 equal parts. I'm going to chop it and break each of these into thirds, and you just kind of have to eyeball it on that. And then shading those 3 parts. So that's 1/3, or sorry, oopsie, 1/6, my bad. 1/6 plus 1/6. And that is 3/6. And you might be noticing, hey, wait a second, Mrs. Smith, that looks like it's also exactly half of that shape. And you're right. If you think about it, 3 is half of 6, right? We've talked about that before. So 3/6 is the same as 1/2. Okay? And then right here, this shape is already divided into 8 parts. And if we shade all 8 of them, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, it's the whole thing, right? So that would be 8/8. And if you have a sandwich and you cut it into 8 pieces and then you eat all of the pieces, you have eaten the whole sandwich, right? So that is equal to 1. Another way to think about that is 8 divided by 8 equals 1, right? We've done that before too. All right, so that's the introduction to fractions. Have some fun cutting up some food with your parents this week, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.